Okay, good morning once again. Thank you so much for joining. I can see now the number is we are at 73. Thank you so much. I know you could have been somewhere busy with some of your duties, but you decided to join this webinar, which I believe is going to help me and you. And if you want to ask questions, the chat will be open. Then we're also going to have the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. And for some of you who might be joining for the first time, we are the Emerging Librarian, and my name is Lisiba Simon Mujapilu. I am the 2023-24 Emerging Librarian winner. So I will be driving this ship, and we have invited a prestigious guest from the National Library of South Africa. And for those of you who don't know what an emerging librarian is all about, so the emerging librarian platform is all about uh, embracing the use of technology, more especially in the LIS sector. So we are moving into the digital space, and this platform, which is the emerging librarian, in partnership with the LIASA, it is there to drive the ship of embracing the use of technology in our sector. I know some of you are anti-technology, but by joining to this workshop, I can see that we are surely and slowly accepting that technology is here and technology is here to stay, and more especially even in our workplaces. So I will be introducing uh, our guest. But before I introduce the guest, let me first welcome you to this platform. You are more than welcome. Feel free to participate. The chat will be open. We're going to ask questions. We're going to have the comments. We're going to engage. If you feel like you want to engage with the speaker, you want to engage with all of us, you are more than welcome to do so. So our guest presenter is Mr. Sitabo Phala. So Mr. Sitabo Phala is very passionate about technologies in the LIS sector, and his areas of interest include the innovative technology to help libraries evolve with the changing times. So Mr. Sitabo has made significant contribution in the LIS sector, whereby he presented two notable papers at the LIASA conference. Again, he is a student at the University of Pretoria, pursuing a Master of Information Technology in Information Science. Setabu is currently based at the National Library of South Africa. Mr. Setabu, over to you.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. I hope I'm audible. All protocols observed to everyone. Thank you for having me here as well. Mr. Lisib, I'm not sure if from this introduction, can I go straight into my presentation, or is
Yeah,
there
thank you.
anything you need to cover?
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. We can hear you very well. You can continue with your presentation.
All right. I'm just going to share my screen now, and then from there, can confirm if you can see it, and I can project. Uh, just hold on. Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen, Sabo. You can just put it on the presentation mode.
Okay. Um, let's do this. Then from there, All right. Is it visible now?
Yes, it's visible, sir.
All
We
right.
we see your full screen. Sorry, it's Anika here from Nabora. We see your full screen with the notes, so you can only share the presentation.
Okay. Just hold on now. There we go. It's better.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Uh, okay. It seems like I'm experiencing the technical difficulties because when I click for you guys to see my presentation, I'm seeing the same thing everyone is seeing. So I'm trying to have my notes already on the other side, but I can just start for now. Or we can pause and then, or I can stop sharing and share again. I'm sorry about this delay, colleagues. Then proceed with the proper apparatus. The
All
notes
right,
are
fine.
critical babies. All right. Now, do you see my presenter view or just the slides?
We see the presenter view.
Mm. All right. It seems like it's either I choose one or the other. The system doesn't allow me to have a different screen from you guys. I don't know why. But yes, welcome to the presentation today. I'll be running a facilitation about the collection development. Firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers, Imaging Librarian, Nevada, all stakeholders for giving me this opportunity to join this webinar and also share the little that I know about the topic at hand, and I'll proceed through with the presentation. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to just go through different facets of the collection development. A good place to start is the collection development policy, the selection and acquisition, collection evaluation and assessment, emerging trends in collection development, where I'll be talking about technologies, the budgeting and funding, collaboration and community involvement, and a case study about the best practices in that regard. So, firstly, um, sorry again, let me pause a bit. Okay, I'm just gonna continue because of the technical difficulties and then continue with you guys seeing my notes as well. So we'll start with the definition of collection development. Collection development is the planning and managing of the library's collection to meet the needs of its users, and it involves selecting, acquiring, maintaining resources such as books, journals, digital media, and other materials. The purpose of it is to ensure that the library's resources are relevant, current, and comprehensive, and then they also support educational, informational, and recreational needs. The importance of collection development in libraries is number one, user satisfaction, to ensure that we have a well-developed collection that aligns with the interests and needs of the library's community, and enhancing user satisfaction and engagement. Also, having good collection development practices allows you to have a relevant collection that is up to date with current trends, emerging topics, and technological advancements. The other importance to note is to have resource management. Helps in making decisions about the budget allocation, space utilization, and resource curation. Um, in this regard, ensuring that you do not exhaust majority of the budget that has been allocated to the acquisition team towards one type of material that may not be used by all users, and ensuring that you spread the budget as much as possible. And then additionally, having educational support, which was touched on with the purpose, making sure that the library can provide support or can be a support system for educational needs such as research activities and lifelong learning initiatives. One other thing that it can also support with is content that helps with professional development as well. So the objectives of this presentation is to, one, understand the basics, make sure that you can clearly define what collection development is and its key components, explore the process by reviewing the steps involved in developing and managing a library collection, understand the best practices by discussing strategies and best practices for effective collection development, and also examine either real-world examples or just a scenario where we can comprehend this topic better, and also consider upcoming trends and challenges in collection development and how libraries can adapt. So the first component of a collection development is understanding a collection development policy. In most instances, we require a document that will streamline or outline how we are supposed to conduct a certain activity that we want. In this case, a collection development. So a collection development policy would be a document that outlines the strategic imposition of a company with regards to the collection development, meaning it provides a structured approach to building and maintaining the library's collection. It also outlines the goals and principles and procedures for selecting and managing resources. An additional purpose of it is to ensure consistency, ensuring that the collection decisions are made based on clear criteria by reducing biases and inconsistencies, making sure that clearly all stakeholders can understand the transparency about why the library is procuring certain materials by showing the practices or the priorities to all the stakeholders, including users, staff, and funders. It also provides a good mechanic for accountability, where it can be used as a reference point for evaluating and justifying collection development, collection decisions and expenditures. The key components of a collection development policies include, one, the selection criteria, where we have four sub-qualities that you consider there. Number one being the relevance. The materials that you choose must meet the needs and the interest of the library's community. Number two, the materials you select must have consideration of the credibility, accuracy, and authority of the content. Number three, it must be based on user requests, usage statistics, and current trends, meaning the more the users look for it, the more incentive the library has to buy that particular item. It must also have diversity, ensuring a diverse range of perspectives and formats. Number five, and also, sorry about that. Number five, also ensuring that the condition and format, the conditions and formats of the items are considered there, where there's an assessment of physical and digital formats as well as the condition of materials. Meaning if you're procuring or taking donations from other vendors, you also assess if those books that you are including in your collection are in good conditions, or if it's a digital format, it can be easily accessible across all frontiers. Number two, another component to consider is the budget allocation, the funding of sources. The details on how funds are allocated are decided on different categories. For example, whether it's a print, digital, or multimedia material. The second component is the budget planning, strategizing for managing and optimizing the budget to balance various collection needs. Number three is also the cost considerations, including purchase costs, subscription fees, and maintenance expenses. So all those three components must be considered when procuring an item, whether it is an ongoing payment system, or is it a once-off fee, or is it easy to maintain, or is it difficult? If it breaks, you have to replace, or can you easily fix the item, whether it's a digital item or if it's a book, for example. And then number three, another component to consider is the resources and formats. I've been touching on this a lot. So understanding what type of resource or format is best for procurement in that regard, whether it's books or journals or e-journals, e-books, databases, multimedia, and more. And then also whether those items are best curated or accessed in print or digital formats, whether it's a physical media or online access, and emerging formats, new formats that may be more easily accessible because of the growing use by users. And then another aspect to consider when doing a collection development policy is to ensure that you have a good system for a policy review and updates. A collection development policy must have regular reviews where the policies should be reviewed to ensure that they remain effective and relevant. And then number two, you should also have a feedback mechanism incorporated within the collection development policy to allow users and staff to refine and adjust the policy as needed. Number three, it must also be very flexible and be able to adapt with changing technology, user needs, or funding. If there is a reduction or an increase, the policy must accommodate that scenario as well. So I will provide more extensive, effective policies at the case study at the bottom. There is a case study that I put there, but for now, just know that all of these components that included in the collection development policy does help in terms of the effectiveness and the measure or the monitoring and evaluation of it. I'll explain further when I'm doing the case study at the near end of the presentation. Now, next we have the selection and acquisition aspect of collection development. The selection criteria, we have the selection criteria, the acquisition methods, we have the role of vendors and publishers, and the challenges in selection and acquisition. And speaking to the selection criteria, we have one, the relevance of the materials to the community of institution needs. As we mentioned in the purpose, when you select a material, must ensure that there's backing to ensure that the material is needed or can support the educational goals or whichever other goal that your library is providing in terms of support to the users. So if it's a research library, for example, you may find that you may have to choose more materials that are more specified towards what you are researching. If it's the South African Reserve Bank and you're in the Economic Research Division, then you'll have materials that are more suited towards economic research. If it's the CSIR, you have materials that are more situated towards scientific and industrial research. If it's the HSRC, you'll have materials that are more suited towards social and social research and all of those other interest that the library has. So if it's an academic institution, obviously there must be different sections that will appeal to different faculties. And if it's a public library, understanding the needs of the users around your library, what most of them are doing, their occupation, their interests, how they would like to improve, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And then number two, also understanding the institutional goals. So obviously, if you have a public library, the goals won't be the same as a research library or a special library or an academic library. So I'm considering how resources support the library's mission and academic programs and research initiatives can be imperative. Also, number three, also incorporating suggestions and requests from library users to tailor the collection to their needs. And then another selection criteria to consider is the quality of content to ensure that the content is accurate and reliable. Evaluating, meaning it must be evaluated for factual correctness and reliability of the information, whether the information is authoritative or argumentative. Those are other key components to include. Basically here you also have to check if you're procuring journals, are they peer reviewed? Are they well respected within the um, field in which you are intending to procure or so forth. And then number two, engagement, assess the potential of the content to engage and serve the um, interests of the users. And then number three, the reputation, consideration of the author, the publisher, or the creator of the content is also paramount to ensure that if you have that collection, you can evaluate it as the best possible collection or book or item or whichever we are speaking about because of that credibility of authoritativeness. I've already touched on authority and credibility of sources, where you verify the expertise, you check if the people have good H indexes, whether they are people who are highly cited on the internet, if it's journals, whether it's a respected author who's qualified, whether the item is peer reviewed and so forth, and also publisher's reputation, to understand if the publisher is a publisher that is more passionate about pumping information out and not just predatory practices of trying to get as many authors to release books without quality checks or peer reviewing those books or so forth. Those are other important key components to consider. I've already spoke about peer reviews as well. So these are paramount in terms of evaluating the quality of the item. And then number four, another selection criteria to consider is the cost and budget considerations. So evaluating whether you can afford the resources or they can fit effectively within the allocated budget, and also comparing the prices going from different vendors and publishers to get the best deals. This also includes something that we'll speak more of in the community section of this presentation. Forming relationships with vendors and publishers and so forth can also enable the library to get reduced prices for items that they're trying to procure. And then number three, long-term costs, and also to factor in things like subscriptions, maintenance, and updates. An example of this is when you are dealing with ebooks. Naturally, it's impossible to just procure an ebook for library usage as an entity on its own. You need a hosting website that will help the users to be able to access the ebook in a way that will not infringe on copyright laws. So an example of such systems are ProQuest and others, where you pay a certain licensing fee, and then through the platform, you can either loan out the ebook or provide access digitally without enabling the user to be able to copy or just download the book without proper copyright considerations. So such things will implicate whether your system or the item that you're procuring will incur additional costs, or is it a once-off fee? And then the second point to consider in selection and acquisition is acquisition methods. Number one, the purchasing item or procuring, understanding whether the material should be acquired through direct purchases from vendors or online retailers. So this one is true for any sales environment. Understanding where an item comes from may save you costs. Like, for example, going from a manufacturer versus to a retail store may have a significant price difference. So when you're doing a purchase there, you have to just evaluate if it's worth the trouble to buy a Juta book from Fanscape or to buy it directly from Juta, and understand if there's like different cost implications or so forth. And then number two, the selection process. Following what we're speaking about at the top, the criteria to ensure that you can justify whether that purchase is informed or not. So if a book is 10,000 and it's not properly peer reviewed or so forth and so forth, that may be identified as frivolous expenditure or something that is not justified for the purchase in that regard. And then number two, another acquisition method is donations. Donors can contribute, or you can accept as a library from individuals, organizations, and publishers as donations. One of the key acquisition methods for the National Library is the legal deposit system. So the collection is built through that law, where each individual is required by law to submit any material written in South Africa or about South Africa to the National Library. And then that material is in turn accepted and placed as part of our collection, and it can be curated in different formats depending on the new acquisitions that we have on the month, or any other um, system or exhibitions that we may have. And then number two, donation policies. These are more developed within the risk department, or where you can liaise with the risk department, where you can develop clear policies on what types of materials can be accepted through donations and what constitutes a formal accepting of a donation within the company. This will ensure that in turn, there's no discrepancies in terms of the relationship of acquisition between the library and a certain vendor. If they've donated and so forth, a clear statement must be placed, and also procedures that will protect both the sellers and the library. And then number three, another acquisition method is subscriptions. As I've mentioned, you can also consider whether you can subscribe to a certain system that may come with its own collection, or you can procure single items. And then acquiring physical journals, magazines, and other periodicals on a subscription basis is another thing to consider. Like as we know, we have journals that are physical and electronical. And if you're procuring the Journal of Information Science in South Africa, for example, then how many issues does it have in a month, in a year? And how much do we have to pay for the subscription to receive each issue? And also that also includes the electronic subscriptions, understanding if you're buying an online system like Sabinet, for example, what does Sabinet journals come with and how can that help your users best? And then it's best to compare all of these systems to ensure that you have the best possible for your users. Number 4 is consortia and collaborative agreements. Number 1, resource sharing. Have a group. It's important as a library to engage with other libraries or other stakeholders to have a group where you can share resources. There's a saying that one man's treasure is another, and one man's treasure is another man's treasure. In terms of when you're deaccessioning, I'll speak about weeding in the next slide, but when you are weeding or deaccessioning, the materials that you may not find relevant for your users may be relevant to another library's user. And through the consortia, you can exchange materials for those that are more relevant towards your library. And those collaborative engagements can also include improve the collection development. But another benefit to having a consortia is to access group discounts or to access certain forums that may make it easier for the procurement to take place. Number 2, having collaborative agreements. As I've mentioned in the policy, to say if you're accepting a give, you must also have like an agreement to say, okay, if forming an agreement with this institution or library, how are we going to exchange in the most fair possible? Everything needs to be tabulated and exchanged and also leverage the collective purchasing power of the library. So if there's like 20 academic libraries in South Africa and we're all requiring a DDC, it may be better to collaborate as libraries and then procure them at a discounted rate, because you may find that the supplier is saying if you buy 100 of them, then you get a discount of this, and then that can now translate into you as a library saving the company maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars or rands through that collaborative agreement. And then number 3, another selection and acquisition point to consider is the role of vendors and publishers. We've already touched on other aspects of it, but here it's just the emphasis to work with vendors to obtain materials, negotiate pricing, and manage orders. Obviously, if you have a good relationship with the publishers or the vendors, then you are able to negotiate certain prices or manage the orders to ensure that your materials are delivered in a timely manner. And then number 2, also interact with the publishers that you purchase from so that you can have more information about new releases, promotional offers, and updates to existing resources. Number 3 is to understand the product information, having detailed information about recommendations from vendors and publishers to aid in decision making. Those informations can also help when you go back to the selection criteria to say what are the authors offering, or what is this material, how is this material authoritative, and so forth. You may also get that information from the vendors or with the recommendations as well, and compare them to your users' needs as well. And then lastly, the thing to consider is the challenges that may be there in acquisitions and selections. Excuse me. Number 1 is you may encounter, or you have to consider the budget constraints. Depending on which institution you are, you have to balance the collections need with the available funding budget. So majority of the time as the library, you have to motivate on why you need a certain amount of budget. And the management in that library may decide to meet you halfway. If you are lucky, you will get all the money that you ask for when you're doing your budget. But when you're doing your collection development policy or selection criteria and so forth, you must also consider if there is a constraint, how am I going to adapt to it? And that also speaks to the second point, and understanding if in 5 years from now, no one would want to use print books, for example, how are we going to adapt to that to ensure that we can um, uh, change the way the information is being consumed in our libraries? And then another challenge that we may have is dealing with resource availability, dealing with issues related to availability, such as bulk orders or limited editions. So, in this instance, it's speaking about if you're trying to procure an item from a vendor and that vendor is the only one that has that item, you may have to place back orders to just receive that item, which may take longer for the item to reach your users. Or if it doesn't have enough editions, that's another challenge that you may experience when trying to procure. And then the vendor reliability, ensuring that whatever vendor you're using delivers on the day that they said they will deliver, and also they provide quality savers. And if they don't, as a library, you need to consider a different vendor. And then lastly, balancing the formats. You may encounter challenges in terms of deciding how much of print versus electronic formats to procure based off of the user needs or preferences and so forth. And with the electronic subscriptions, most of the time, you find that in certain types of libraries, it's not identified as a good expenditure because they are often more expensive than just a single acquisition of print materials. Um, Now let's move towards the collection evaluation and assessment. This is another component of you ensuring that you have a good um, collection development practice. So the first thing is to ensure that you understand the importance of a regular assessment. Continuous regular assessments help to ensure that the collection remains relevant, as mentioned previously, and also that it aligns with the user needs and institutional goals. The also another importance of doing that regular assessment is to ensure that you have informed decision making, where you provide, sorry about that, where you provide um, data and insights that guide future collection development decisions, including what is acquired and what is weeded, and then also optimizing the resources that you have, identifying what items are underused or outdated, and allowing for better allocation of resources and budget. Another thing that is not spoken about nearly as enough in collection development is space. So as you're doing your collection development, you need to also consider if there will be enough space for whatever you're procuring. Because if you don't factor in the outdated materials as much as you are factoring in the acquisition, then you may find that the library may have a space issue, physical space, and then you may not be able to place the items in the most optimal way, which can provide the engagement that we spoke about earlier on. Now let's speak about the methods of evaluation, how you can evaluate whether your collection development strategy is correct or not. Number one is usage statistics. It's imperative to analyze from the usage, which ones are by tracking circulation, you can analyze which ones are used and how often they are checked out or accessed in any other form. And then also the digital analytics to understand um, whether the electronic resources are used, such as ebooks, databases, online journals, and so forth. And then the citation analysis, where you evaluate from your system, from your library management system or OPEC, which items are cited more and more, and identifying them as high engagement items and so forth. And also identifying low usage areas for reading purposes. And then another method of evaluation you can consider is usage surveys and feedback. Having a direct input where you gather feedback from users through a survey, suggesting boxes or focus groups to understand their needs, preferences, and satisfaction with regards to the collection. And then also doing a needs analysis or a needs assessment where you use a survey to identify gaps in the collection and refine the selection criteria we spoke about earlier on. And then you should also have satisfaction metrics where you measure the user satisfaction with existing resources and services to provide overall collection quality. Citation analysis also, taking that, you can also consider it for research impact, analyze how often and where materials are cited in academic and professional literature to assess their impact and relevance. Another thing to consider is the resource value to determine the influence of specific resources on research and academic work or in any other form of work. And then also that guides the future acquisitions and maintenance of the company. And then the subsequent assessment or aspect to consider is the weeding and deaccessioning of materials. You must have a criteria for weeding. One criteria identifies the condition, remove items that are physically damaged or deteriorated beyond repair. Before this, I would just like to elaborate that at the National Library, this is primarily different. I'm providing just a bit of a case study for you guys to understand. Before an item is removed from the collection, it has to go through different processes first. We have a bindery team. We also have a deacidification team and a digitization team. So all of these items for preservation help with retaining as much materials as possible. So if an item is broken, it may go to the binding team where the spines of the book may be replaced or the pages may be glued back together. They have all the tools to ensure that if it's a book or a newspaper and so forth, it can be returned to a good format that can be used again. If that fails, then it may go to the digitization department where in its condition, it can be scanned onto the server and then kept in a digital format or placed on our digital website where you can still access the material after maybe the physical item has perished. Another mechanism for elongating the lifespan of books that we do that also work in conjunction with reading is the deacidification plant. We have one of the two only plants in South Africa where books and newspapers that are brittle or that have turned yellow with time due to acidification can be deacidified for longer lifespan so that they don't tear or so forth. All of these items also help with just not quickly going towards the removal of items because depending on the type of library, you may find that some items are priceless, if I could say. You may find that that's the only item that is available and you cannot afford to read it even if it's beyond it's deteriorated. So that's where you can include that. And then number two, relevance. You must also consider if your materials are still relevant or outdated and no longer align with the current needs of the users library community. That could be the researchers, normal users, or the staff, or any person who's going to use the collection. And then number three, usage. You can discard items with low circulation or usage rates, provided that they are not historically significant or unique. As I've mentioned, you cannot weed or remove items that are historically significant or unique. If it's an item from the 1800s and it's the only one in existence, then that item is invaluable and cannot be discarded. Another mechanism you can do to retain it, you may remove it from the library users' general use and preserve it in a way that it can be curated for them to gain the information from the material, but not necessarily use it to further damage it. Duplicates are another thing to consider, or another aspect to consider if you're reading. You can remove duplicate copies of materials if they're no longer necessary, meaning if the usage of the material is low and people do not require to use the item at the same time, you may remove the duplicates to ensure that you have more space. And then you also have to have ethical considerations when you are reading. As I've mentioned, you have to consider the preservation and historical value, ensure that the historical and cultural significance of the materials are preserved and transferred to appropriate institutions, whether it's a different format or whether it's a um, different area where you can preserve it for just the dissemination of knowledge and not just heavy usage. And then another ethical consideration to consider is the community sensitivity. Consider the impact of removing materials on users and avoid removing items that may be valued by a specific community or group. Meaning, if an item is important towards students, you must also consider that before removing it, regardless of how much it's gone, I mean, how much it's not used or so forth. An example of this, it's a very funny example, but you may find that the DDC is only being used periodically in the library, but you may not discard the DDC set because it is important and it's timeless. So things like that are ethical considerations that you can also include. And then the other one is the environmental responsibility, where you have to dispose of materials in an environmentally responsible manner, including recycling or donating where possible, and also considering the impact of the evaluation on future development. And then also include the informed planning where you use evaluation results to plan future acquisitions and so forth. So I'm on the last point now on how this assessment may impact future development. You may use that assessment to identify where you need to add new items. I've already touched on certain other aspects, so I'll streamline through. You can also do strategic adjustments towards your policy based off of the assessment that you received. And then also you can reallocate the budget into more in-demand resources and update the selection criteria as I've mentioned. And also you may enhance the user satisfaction and engagement by responding to feedback and incorporating the user needs back into the collection development decisions. The the other impact on the future development is the evidence-based decisions, meaning that you can prove or rely on evaluation data to justify the collection development decisions and to demonstrate the library's commitment towards meeting user needs. So that's basically what a collection and evaluation assessment encapsulates in all its forms. So you have to understand its importance and also understand how to evaluate by going through different methods of evaluation, understand the weighting and de-accessioning criteria, and also the impact of that assessment on your future decisions as a collection development practitioner. Okay, now let's go to what's the emerging trends in collection development. So the first emerging trend is the digital collections and e-resources. I'm also going to touch on open access and institutional repositories. the diversity and inclusivity in collection development, and the role of technology in collection development, where I'll speak about AI and machine learning and integrated library systems. So going to the first one, another a big trend we can consider in collection development is the shift to digital materials. So there's an increasing preference for digital formats due to accessibility, cost effectiveness, and user demand. E-journals are providing timely updates and ease of access to the latest research, catering to academic and professional communities. Databases provide a comprehensive repository that offer a wide range of content, including academic papers, multimedia, and specialized resources. Licensing and access is another trend that you have to consider, where you speak about the challenges that include negotiating licenses, ensuring perpetual access, and managing subscription costs. Another trend, number 2, that you must consider is the open access or open access movement. Be more in support of growing support for free and unrestricted access to scholarly research and reducing barriers to information. That can also be shown in terms of requesting permission from open access journals and then incorporating their links within your library website for users to be able to access that open access material, and also understanding the relationship of that open access relationship between the library and the journal in question. And then another trend that you have to consider is the institutional repositories, the platforms where institutions archive and disseminate their own scholarly input, promoting visibility and access to research. So with the growing digitization rates, now dissertations and other materials that are produced within the universities have their own repositories. An example of that is UP Space. UJ also has their own repository. University of Limpopo has their own repositories, and you are able to access other people's scholarly input through that repository. It may help with the improvement of research or the library's objectives in that regard. And then another emerging trend that you must also consider is the impact on libraries. Libraries play a huge role in advocating for open access and managing repositories and educating patrons about the OA benefits. So there's a huge debate in that regard where um, there's a conversation about the necessity of paying for materials or paywalls versus accessing materials for free. One of the biggest arguments in accessing materials for free is the access itself and also the wide range of wide reach free access might have to users. So as libraries must also advocate for open access and also not be not like also take into considerations the impact that it may have on vendors, because if vendors are impacted to a point that they want to pull out of open access, then it may impact the ability for the collection development to be done at the end of the day. So this is another area which we can focus on colleagues and have an ongoing debate to improve our own collection development in the future. And then the third point that I'll be going into is the diversity and inclusivity in collection development. Inclusive collections are those that are expanding to represent diverse voices, perspectives, cultures, ensuring equitable access to information for all communities. That could also include books that were or books or materials that were previously considered as controversial, like LGBTQ books and so forth, ensuring that those collections are there for people to learn more about books that are written in that, and also minority groups that may not be well known about. Things like South African Aboriginals can also be included there because it is a sensitive topic about the Khoisans. Materials like that can also be included as an emerging trend for people to understand different groups. And then another aspect of diversity to consider cultural responsiveness, having selection policies that reflects the needs and interests of the underrepresented groups. I just gave an example with the Khoisans or the Aboriginals, and promoting a broader understanding of global issues. And then making sure that through collection development, you can also engage with that. And then the challenges in terms of the diversity and inclusivity in collection development it may be difficult for you to balance diverse needs with budget constraints and the availability of diverse resources. So, as I've mentioned previously, you have to have priorities of what is deemed to be an integral part of what you get to procure. So even though you want to be more inclusive, it may be difficult because the more you try to accommodate, the more money it will require. And if you have budget constraints, then that will be an unfortunate situation. Now, let's go into the role of technology in collection development. Number one, let's speak about AI and machine learning. I feel like AI has been spoken about now. We know about generative AI, we know about machine learning, but just to refresh, it's just technologies that are developed in a way that systems are designed with an ability to self-develop themselves. So you may find that the two spectrums of that, where an algorithm is created for a machine to be able to analyze data and improve itself, or two, existing vast amounts of data are fed into a natural language processing unit, where the natural language processing unit will then form its own intelligence around that information that has been fed to it. The two differences I'm providing now, the one may be chatbots, and then the second one may be ChatGPT. Those technologies play a role in terms of one, automation. AI is used to automate tasks like cataloging, metadata generation, and usage analytics, and improving efficiency. I'm one advocate who, when people are saying AI is going to replace us and so forth, I always advocate against it against that mentality, because AI is there to just improve your own comprehension as a human being, if I could say. So certain things that may take more time for us to understand, AI can do it at a fraction of the time, and it can also explain to you concepts that are difficult as if you are a 5-year-old. And I feel like that's the best sign of intelligence. If you can comprehend something and reproduce it, then it's a win-win at the end. So using AI machine learning in collection development can also help with that. Having usage analytics being done through AI, where you feed the data you collected through the surveys I spoke about earlier into AI and get a visualization about the emerging trends, and also asking the natural language processing unit, for example, how it can suggest emerging trends there, and then taking that information and also including it with your own observations as a collection development practitioner to have a more streamlined collection development policy in the future. I already spoke about the predictive analysis, where the machine can learn models to predict the user needs and training, and also it can guide you in terms of acquisition or reading decisions. And then the second technology I would like to speak about is the integrated library systems for streamlined operations. So an integrated library system may have various functions integrated within, like cataloging, circulation, and acquisitions into one system. Ivada is one of them, and OCLC is another, where you can also be able to do all of those things. So it's important as a collection development practitioner to understand how those systems work, because different parts of the system may help you in terms of different statistics. So you need to collaborate with the metadata team, for example, to understand the information about the materials that have been in the system. You need to collaborate with the information access team for circulation data. You need to collaborate. You are the acquisition team, but if that system is now integrated, it's easier to move that data from one place to the other. If not, you as the collection development practitioner can be able to access that information from different aspects of the system. And then number two, you can also enhance user experience by using technology where you use suggestions and advanced search capabilities and personalized recommendations based off of the usage of the user. The usage where the user can get, or since you're interested in AI, here's different materials that would do that. That information can then be fed to you in the back end to say, because of this particular interest, you may have to consider these materials for future acquisitions. Now let's move to budgeting and funding. So with budgeting and funding, we speak about the allocation of funds, justifying budget requests, managing budget constraints, and fundraising and grants. So here I spoke about majority of this content earlier on, but I'm just going to mention key aspects to say budgets are often allocated due to institutional priorities and user demands or strategic goals of the company. So you may find that the budget may be applicable to you or not based off of that. And number two, I mentioned that you need to also consider that you must balance the needs. So understanding how much physical or digital aspects collections to procure to ensure that the budgeting is done properly, and then also understand the emerging areas of interest that I've mentioned in the previous slides. Usage data is another thing for you to understand when doing allocation of funds. As I've mentioned, you may use the surveys that you collected to guide your decisions for future budgeting motivations. And then number two, how to justify the budget request. So you need to demonstrate value by using metrics such as usage statistics, cost per use analysis, and user satisfaction surveys to show the impact of the library resources. Number two, you need to provide motivations of how that budget will align more with the strategic goals of the institution by emphasizing how that budget is needed for the support of research, teaching, and community engagement. You also need to be able to do a narrative building where you craft compelling stories that highlights the library's role in academic success or research innovation and community support. So in that instance, that narrative building will also be translated towards curation at a later stage. And then number three, how you manage budget constraints. You may implement cost-saving measures like consortium purchasing, shared resource, consortiums, purchasing, and shared resources, or negotiating better licensing terms. I've explained extensively previously. You may also prioritize essential resources and focus funding on of lower priority. While delaying or cutting lower priority items. That also includes the ethical considerations I spoke about earlier. And then number two, you must also have a mindset of innovation, explore alternative formats like open access and digital first collections to stretch limited budgets. And then another mechanism where you can manage funding is the fundraising and grants. You can seek external grants from government agencies, foundations, and private donors to supplement the budget. So you can either get donations directly by books or other materials or money. And you can also have a community engagement where you build relationships with alumni, local businesses, broader community to secure donations and sponsorships. Grant writing, develop a strong grant proposal that may align with the goals of the funding organizations, highlighting the library's impact and innovation. And then now let's go into collaboration and community involvement. In this regard, as I said earlier on, as a collection development specialist or an acquisitions librarian, you need to be able to have collaboration and community involvement to maximize your buying power, if I could say. So you can partner with other libraries, you can do the consortiums, you can also do a knowledge exchange where you collaborate on best practices, staff training, joint initiatives to enhance service offerings in professional development. Number two, you must engage in community and collection decisions. So meaning, other than the user feedback where you're seeking input from users, you can also engage with advisory committees where you establish advisory committees to involve local stakeholders in collection development decisions and ensuring that collection reflects the diverse interests and needs of the users. You can also do public programs like events or workshops and discussions that invite the provide discussions that invite the community members to contribute ideas about suggesting or improving the collection. And then another collaboration initiative you can do is to partner with educational institutions and organizations. During academic collaborations, you can work with local schools, colleges, universities, and the libraries that to align the library's collection with curricular needs and research priorities. So you may find that you have Mankweng Library, for example, that is close to the University of Limpopo Library. The librarian from Mankweng can collaborate with the University of Limpopo to either get materials or suggestions about what the community around the UNC library may be able to access as opposed to that, or also fostering a relationship where books that are read from the university can be donated to the public library. And then number two, partnering with museums, historical societies, and nonprofits to create specialized collections, exhibits, and programs that enrich the community. So as we know, as the library, we fall under the Department of Sports. So having the Department of Sports connecting you with other museums or other historical societies or even foundations like the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Sharon Matleke, Nelson Mandela Foundation can also help with building specialized collections that may enrich the communities. And then the grants are another initiative that you can do where you can leverage both the library and the partners for better resources and services. Now let's go into a case study. So with the case study here, I just wanted to bring a library that is fictional. So let's say we have the Riverside Public Library where they developed an effective collection development policy. So if they're saying they have a good collection development strategy, how would they evaluate that? Number one, that library would in turn have a good monitoring and evaluation strategy, meaning they can check the user statistics of the materials. They can check if the users are engaging with the materials in terms of whether it's still the users are still interested or not, and whether the content that the users are accessing is still relevant and so forth. And then they can also check the cost implications of that item. So going back to the slide where we were speaking about the evaluation criteria, they can do different forms. So you can do an evaluation of the library. They have a good evaluation of the library space and maybe the good functioning system of the library. Number two, They have a good evaluation system for what materials need to be weeded or need to be kept. Number three, they have good ethical practices in terms of procuring or discarding items. They have a balanced mechanic to ensure that materials that are procured are enough in terms of digital formats or electronic formats. And then lastly, they are able to identify the challenges that they experience every year and then provide lessons or insights in terms of what is the best practices for the future. And that brings me to the end of the presentation, and I feel that we'll be moving towards the Q&A next. Thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure sharing the information with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Setabo Pala. Can we give a round of applause to Mr. Setabo for such an eye-opening seminar? I think for me personally, I learned a lot from your presentation, and I believe everybody learned a lot from your presentation, how you related the collection development and the use of technology, particularly the AI. It was amazing for me. So thank you so much for availing yourselves and sharing knowledge with the rest of the librarians across the country. So thank you so much. The presentation will be available on YouTube under our channel, yes, as well as the Imagine Librarian. So we will share everything with you because I've seen from the chats that people are requesting for the tools of trade from Mr. Pala. Don't worry, we will share everything with you because the main purpose of this is to capacitate those who are working in libraries, particularly in the collection development directorate. So thank you so much, Mr. Pala. So now we are going to move to the question and answer session. So um, we'll be taking questions, and if you feel like you also want to add some comments, you are more than welcome to do so. So I'm going to take the first rounds of questions. So I will request that we have at least three people. Then after that, Mr. Pala can answer the questions. And then if there are still more questions, then we can have the second round. And then those who feel like they just want to write their questions, you're more than welcome to write your questions in the question and answer chat boot so that Mr. Pala can answer all your questions. So for now, let me take question. You raise your hand, then I note you, and then I also give you the platform. So I will be working with Mr. Apelelenzi Monday. Don't worry. So yeah, let's take questions. Questions, comments, just raise your hand, then we note you. Hello, questions? Can be a comment, can be a question, or you want to add something, you are more than welcome to do so. Okay, in the meantime, Mr. Pala, I will read from the chat. Thank you for the presentation. Very fruitful. Thank you once more, and to Liasa for the opportunity. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. So most of the comments from the chat box, they are just appreciating your presentation. It looks like we don't have some questions unless people are still structuring their questions.
Mr. Rapau, sorry for interjecting, has a question. Um, he asks if when last did the National Library make reading?
Oh, yeah.
It's yeah. Okay, I can just answer that. It's being done as like annually like any other library. The reason why I mentioned the deacidification plant and the preservation initiatives was for me to just emphasize that all avenues explored before materials can be weeded. And normally the ethical considerations determine whether the item will go towards the preservation department or just straight to weeding. But we do weed just like any other library on a yearly basis, and we also have a acquisition just like any other library.
Okay, thank you. I believe Mr. Rapau is answered. Okay, it looks like there are no questions unless Mr. Rapau, you want to have a follow-up question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues.
Afternoon.
I just want to engage this process of collection development, especially looking at public libraries. We are in a situation where we find school libraries and basically even the other public libraries without budget. So, and these are government institutions. How do you assist them in developing? How does it them being assisted with accumulating the budget, and how do they have to go with their collection development since they are not directly given the budget? And most of the time we find ourselves restricted with budget. And on the follow-up of the first question was, because we are doing weeding nationally, are we informed as the public about the books that you are weeding? Because I have not yet received any email that the National Library is doing these materials are going to be weeded. What if those materials that you are weeding, maybe me as a librarian in an institution, I need them? So I'm also, I hope you can be able to clarify us on that one. Thank you.
All right. I'll first engage in terms of the National Library's issue. As I've mentioned in the presentation earlier on, I want to just encourage all the people here to foster sort of a good relationship between types of libraries. Libraries with higher budgets, I think it's high time as librarians we form relationships with them, especially public libraries, so that we can get access to certain information that may be free. Just to mention a few things that I've mentioned there. For you as the public librarian, if I could say, as am I, we are always encouraged at the National Library to seek potential funding from outside. So, meaning we collaborate or write emails with different stakeholders to understand how much they can offer to the library, and then you do get donations in terms of that. For example, with us, we have a good working relationship with Sabinet, where we provide them with the government printing works, meaning the OPD materials, like the gazettes that are physical, and they get to digitize them on their behalf. And then in turn, we get their journal database for a reduced, if not free price. I'm not sure there. So it's such initiatives that help improve the, the collection. But number two, with regards to the weeding department, what I'll do, I'll need to get your contact details so that I can connect you with someone who directly works in that department. And then they can also clarify how the weeding is done and how donations work in that department as well. And then because we have a lot of storage space in the basement. What happens with weeding is that there's an open publications or open shelf, and then there's the basement shelf. So they call the basement shelf the legal deposit. So most of the time, if we are moving books from the open shelf, we are reading them from the open shelf for space, we move them towards the legal deposit. And then that's how we call it reading in that instance, but it's not necessarily discarding. I'm not sure if books are being discarded, but when I was in the preservation, I know that there were certain newspaper duplicates that were being discarded. Those are an example of the readings that were done. But what I'll do for a very direct answer, I'll connect you to one of the people who work um in the in the department to engage with you. But make sure that for the best friend of a person who's limited with budget, it's collaboration. It's a consortium. It doesn't stop us now as mostly if most people who've joined are um have a WhatsApp group. Technology is advanced now. And then with that group, it's the same consortia I was talking about. We have um, a library so and so saying we have this collection that we want to get rid of. Mr. Rabao, would you be willing to receive it? If so, just pay for the courier or the logistic fees to get those things to your library and so forth. And I feel like that will really deal with the issues around the the budget constraints that we are experiencing in the um, public libraries, but also initiatives help. So our public libraries may have like a small computer room and so forth. As the librarian, if you know how to access open access material, then you can develop information literacy sessions where you teach your kids this is how you experience or this is how you access open access materials, or this is a free ethical website that you can use to also expand on your collection, also supplementing it with what you have in your collection as well. So that helps too.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Stavo. So, Mr. Rapaus left his email address in the chat box. I think you can note it down. And also, there is a comment from Devim Kwanazi. He's saying, thank you for the presentation. Just want to add under section selection and acquisition by adding some proposed solutions. So this one is proposing the way forward. Number one, budget should be increased. So I believe he or she is saying we should write a motivation in order for us to increase our budget. And then number two, engage with the community. Then we go out to the community whereby we engage with them and then engage through the imbizos, the conferences. And yeah, so this is the suggestion. Thank you so much, Devin Kwanasi. And then shall I say thank you so much for the insightful presentation. We will take note of some points made when we attend to the collection development activities. Thank you so much. And also there is a comment. This one is for everyone, but I think Ms. Frida sent it to the host and panelists, but I will read it out. Everyone says, please watch out for the next webinar on how Nevada discovery and acquisition can assist in selection, acquisition, evaluation, as well as assessment. And then there's also another comment from Havo Silomo. He's saying, what is your stand on the notion that collection development section as a whole should be stand-alone from acquisition section to avoid acquisition librarian making decision on what material to buy? Provincial or municipalities and big municipalities such as the metros. So this one is asking Mr. Pala his stand on removing acquisition from, I mean, in removing collection development from the acquisition so that we can have two different sections in one library. So Mr. Pala will answer to that. There's another one who's supporting the formulation of the WhatsApp group for librarians so that they can exchange the knowledge. Yeah, so Mr. Pala, can you attend to Kgabo Selomo's comment?
Yes, Mr. Slomo or Miss Slomo, I'm not sure how is the neutral name. I'm sorry if I butchered your pronoun. Uh, Um, the collection development is a concept. Acquisition librarians have collection development as part of their core KPIs. So one cannot exist without the other. We need acquisition librarians to be the forefront of deciding materials to buy. But the whole point of this presentation was to show how to go about that practice in the most effective way. And just to quote Frida as well, that also means focusing more on or just in using as much resources that you can just to improve that capability for you to do better in decisions in terms of materials to buy and so forth. So yes, whether it's a big municipality or metropolitan and so forth, if one team decides on what the library is going to get and they're not directly at the library, there will be a disconnect and the collection development will not be as effective as it needs to be, unless if there's a direct or effective mechanism for communication and consideration about user needs at that community library or at that municipality.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Pala. So in the interest of time, we will request Ms. Frida to come to the podium and do the vote of thanks. Thank you.
I cannot show my video because it said something is wrong with the technology on Lily's side, but can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am.
Yes.
Well, I am astonished. I first need to introduce myself. I'm Frida and I'm the CEO of Nevada. Mr. Paula, this has been one of the most informative sessions that I ever attend. I can only echo all the thanks, and I can say I think we all have a better understanding of the how of the process and also the importance of the process. But saying that, I also could hear the challenges that you have. And I think the biggest challenge will always be the tight budgets. And for that reason, I was very excited to hear that private sectors can also add to solve this problem, because I have a few plans of my own to put forward to Liasa with regards to this. But listen, really, Mr. Paula, I think this was very, very, very good. And I cannot thank you enough. Also for the chair, for what he has said. And then Simon, thank you very much for putting all of this together. And we will follow this session up with a presentation around Nevada discovery, acquisitions, and especially the vendor part of the acquisitions, to let attendees understand how the tool can assist you. I wish you all the best, and I think we close then the session. And Mr. Paula, I wish you so very, very much happiness and blessings in your career. I think our paths will meet again. God's blessings to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us today. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Frida, and to everybody who managed to attend. Thank you so much for honoring this webinar. Before we close, I don't know if Mr. Pala want to say something before we close.
It's just a vote of thanks. I'm hoping that this webinar could be a beautiful segue to ensure that we increase our collaboration as librarians. Um, in the previous librarians celebration we emphasized how much we need to communicate. Colleagues, let's not exist in our own bubbles. Although you're working in an academic library, your expertise can help the public library to a very good extent, and so forth. So if you are here, let's know, let's collaborate further. I'm on LinkedIn, the same name, Strabo Pala. Let's connect there. Let's talk in inboxes. Let's facilitate good networking practices. And also let's engage with other companies like Nevada and other places. One thing I've noticed as South Africans, most South African librarians do not understand the systems they are using. And it's a good segue to also follow platforms like Nevada and other platforms to understand how library management systems work and how it can also make your job easier in any department that you are in. And by that, I'm so grateful to be here. And I thank from the emerging librarian, Ms. Frida Apelele, everyone for being here and the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Okay, we appreciate you and thank you so much, everybody. So this marks the end of our webinar. Please be on the lookout for other seminars, the webinars, the workshops. So thank you so much.